They say every neighborhood has secrets. But on Millbrook Street, in the quiet suburb of Riverside Heights, the secrets ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of what Detective Sarah Chen found in the basement of 1847 Millbrook Street on a cold November morning in 2019, a discovery that would haunt her for the rest of her career. Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, a retired schoolteacher who'd lived at 1845 Millbrook Street for 32 years, first noticed it on a Tuesday morning while watering her azaleas. A sweet, sickly odor that seemed to drift through the hedge separating her property from the house next door. At first, she thought it was a dead animal. Maybe a raccoon had crawled under the neighbor's porch and died there. It happens sometimes in the suburbs. But as the days passed and the smell grew stronger, Patricia became convinced it was something else. Something worse. The house next door, 1847 Millbrook Street, had always been quiet. Too quiet, Patricia would later tell investigators. She'd lived beside it for 3 decades, watching families come and go, but the current resident was different. Daniel Marsh had moved in 18 months earlier. A thin man in his early 40s with hollow cheeks and nervous eyes that never quite met yours when you spoke to him. He kept odd hours. Patricia would hear his car pulling into the driveway at 3, sometimes 4 in the morning. She'd see him unloading things from his trunk, boxes, bags, shapes she couldn't quite make out through the darkness, and the privacy fence he'd installed shortly after moving in. "I minded my own business," Patricia would later say, her voice cracking. "I should have called someone sooner." By Friday, the smell had become unbearable. Patricia called the police non-emergency line, reporting a possible dead animal on the neighboring property. The dispatcher assured her someone would check it out. Officer Marcus Webb arrived at 2:47 p.m. He was a veteran of the Riverside Heights Police Department, 20 years on the force, and he'd investigated his share of welfare checks and nuisance calls. He knocked on the door of 1847 Millbrook Street 3 times. No answer. He walked the perimeter of the house, and that's when he smelled it. Not the smell of a dead raccoon or a backed-up sewer line. Officer Webb had been to enough crime scenes to recognize the unmistakable odor of human decomposition. He radioed for backup immediately. Detective Sarah Chen got the call at 4:15 p.m. She was in the middle of testifying in court about an unrelated burglary case when her phone vibrated with a text from Lieutenant Harris. "Get to 1847 Millbrook Street. Now, possible homicide." Sarah had been with the Riverside Heights Detective Division for 7 years. She'd worked robberies, assaults, even a murder-suicide 2 years prior. But nothing would prepare her for what waited in that basement. By the time she arrived, the house was surrounded by patrol cars. The forensics van was parked in the driveway. Officer Webb stood on the front lawn, his face pale, smoking a cigarette even though Sarah knew he'd quit 3 years ago. "It's bad, Detective," he said quietly. "Really bad." The front door had been breached. Daniel Marsh was nowhere to be found. His car was gone, and according to his employer at a local warehouse, he hadn't shown up for his shift in 3 days. Sarah pulled on latex gloves and protective shoe covers and stepped inside. The house was surprisingly ordinary. A worn couch in the living room, a small television on a stand, bills stacked on the kitchen counter, dishes in the sink, the kind of mundane details that made the horror of what came next even more disturbing. The basement door was in the kitchen, painted the same beige as the walls, easy to overlook. But when forensic tech Miguel Santos opened it, the smell that rushed out was overwhelming. Sarah had to step back, breathing through her mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. The wooden stairs descended into darkness. Someone had disconnected the light fixture at the bottom, leaving only the weak illumination from the kitchen to guide them. Sarah switched on her flashlight, and together with Santos she descended. The beam of her flashlight swept across the basement, and that's when she saw them. Photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They covered every wall, from floor to ceiling, layer upon layer, some taped, some tacked, some glued directly to the concrete. All of them showed the same person, a young woman with dark hair and green eyes, captured in countless moments of her daily life. Walking to her car, sitting in a coffee shop, at the gym, in the grocery store, close-ups taken from outside her window at night. But it wasn't the photographs that made Sarah's blood run cold. In the center of the basement, illuminated now by Santos's high-powered work lights, was a chair, a wooden chair with leather restraints on the arms and legs. And surrounding the chair, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 plastic storage bins. Sarah already knew what was inside them. The smell made that unmistakably clear. The coroner, Dr. Elizabeth Rourke, worked through the night. By dawn, the grim inventory was complete. The 7 bins contained the remains of 7 different women, all in various stages of decomposition. All had been dismembered, their bodies carefully separated and stored. Dr. Rourke estimated the deaths had occurred over a span of approximately 14 months, one victim roughly every 2 months. But there was an 8th victim, and she was still alive. The photographs on the basement walls all showed the same woman, 29-year-old Jennifer Hollis, a paralegal who lived 12 miles away in the neighboring town of Oakfield. She had no idea she'd been the subject of Daniel Marsh's obsession for over a year. When Sarah and her partner, Detective James Kowalski, knocked on Jennifer's door at 7 a.m. Saturday morning, the young woman answered in her bathrobe, coffee cup in hand, completely unaware that she'd been marked for death. The color drained from Jennifer's face as Sarah explained why they were there. She invited them inside with trembling hands, and together they reviewed the photographs Sarah had brought, just a small sample of the thousands found in Marsh's basement. "I don't understand," Jennifer whispered, staring at a photo of herself getting her mail, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. "I don't even know who he is. I've never seen this man before." That was the thing that made Sarah's skin crawl. Daniel Marsh hadn't been rejected by Jennifer. She hadn't turned him down for a date or ended a relationship with him. He'd simply chosen her, the way you might choose a book from a library shelf. Random, arbitrary, meaningless to everyone except him. Jennifer was immediately placed in protective custody. An APB went out for Daniel Marsh. White male, 42 years old, 5 feet 11 inches, 160 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes, driving a 2015 gray Honda Civic. Armed and extremely dangerous. The investigation into the 7 victims began immediately. Who were these women? How had Marsh selected them? Where had he abducted them? Over the next 72 hours, as forensic analysts worked to identify the victims through DNA and dental records, a chilling pattern emerged. All 7 women were between the ages of 26 and 32. All had dark hair and green eyes, just like Jennifer Hollis. All lived alone. And most disturbing of all, they disappeared from locations all over the tri-state area. Different counties, different jurisdictions, different police departments that had never connected the cases. The first victim was identified as Rebecca Torres, 28, who'd vanished from a shopping mall parking lot in Grayson County 14 months earlier. Her family had filed a missing persons report, but with no witnesses, no evidence, and no leads, the case had gone cold. The second was Megan Carlisle, 31, last seen leaving her yoga studio in Pinewood 3 months after Rebecca disappeared. Again, no witnesses, no evidence. Just a woman who vanished into thin air. One by one, the identities came back. Amanda Wright, Lisa Chen, Caitlin Porter, Jessica Ramirez, Nicole Brennan. 7 women, 7 families who'd spent months wondering and hoping and praying, only to receive the worst possible news. Sarah spent hours reviewing Daniel Marsh's background. He was a ghost, no criminal record, no history of violence. He'd graduated from a community college with a degree in computer programming, held a series of unremarkable jobs, lived in 4 different states over the past 15 years. His coworkers described him as quiet, polite, unmemorable. His landlord said he always paid rent on time and never caused problems. There were no warning signs. No red flags, nothing that would have predicted he was capable of such calculated evil. But Sarah found something else. In Marsh's bedroom, hidden in a locked drawer, was a journal. Page after page of meticulous notes, documenting his surveillance of each victim. He'd watched them for weeks, sometimes months, learning their routines, identifying moments when they were most vulnerable. He'd written about Rebecca Torres, parks in the northwest corner of the lot, stays late on Thursdays, usually alone, perfect. About Megan Carlisle, trusts too easily, stopped to help me with, car trouble, without hesitation, mistake. The journal entries were clinical, detached, describing murder the way someone might describe changing a tire. There was no emotion, no remorse. Just cold, mechanical details about how he'd approached each woman, subdued them, transported them to his basement. And, at the end of the journal, one final entry dated 6 days before the police found the basement. Jennifer Hollis, Thursday night. She walks her dog alone at 9 p.m. Ready to complete the collection. Daniel Marsh had a 6-day head start. He could be anywhere, across the country, across the border, vanished into the anonymity of another quiet suburb where no one would look twice at a polite, forgettable man. But Sarah didn't think he'd run far. Something about the journal, about the photographs, told her that Marsh was obsessed with completion. He'd planned to make Jennifer Hollis his 8th victim, and she suspected he wouldn't be able to let that go. Obsessive personalities like his didn't handle disruption well. She was right. On the 4th day of the manhunt, a security camera at Jennifer's apartment complex captured a gray Honda Civic slowly circling the parking lot at 2 a.m. The driver wore a baseball cap pulled low, but when the enhanced footage came back from the lab, there was no doubt. Daniel Marsh had returned, unable to stay away from his intended victim. A surveillance team was deployed immediately. Jennifer was moved to a secure location, but her apartment was monitored 24/7. If Marsh returned, they'd be ready. He came back 3 nights later. At 3:47 a.m., the Honda Civic pulled into the lot again. This time, Marsh got out. He wore dark clothing and carried a backpack. He moved with purpose toward Jennifer's building, glancing around, but seeing nothing. The tactical team was hidden in unmarked vehicles, watching his every move. Marsh used a lockpick gun on the building's entrance door. He was inside in less than 30 seconds. The team watched on interior security cameras as he climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, approached apartment 3B, Jennifer's unit, and began working on her door lock. "All units, move in," came the command over the radio. The tactical team swarmed the building. Marsh heard them coming, boots on stairs, the crackle of radios, and he ran. Not down toward the exit, but up, toward the roof access. Sarah was in the parking lot when she heard shots fired. Her blood froze. She raced toward the building as the radio chatter exploded with shouting, commands, and then, finally, "Suspect down! Suspect down! We need a bus, 3rd floor landing." Daniel Marsh had pulled a knife when cornered on the stairs. He'd charged at Officer Webb, the same officer who'd first responded to Patricia Hendricks's call about the smell. Webb had fired twice. Both shots center mass. Marsh was pronounced dead at 4:23 a.m. at Riverside General Hospital. He never regained consciousness. He never explained why he'd chosen those 8 women. He never showed a shred of remorse. The families of the 7 victims were finally able to lay their loved ones to rest. Funerals were held, memorials erected. But closure, Sarah knew, was a word people used when they didn't understand that some wounds never truly heal. Jennifer Hollis moved out of state. Sarah heard she changed her name, started over somewhere far from Riverside Heights. She hoped Jennifer found peace, but she doubted it. How do you forget that someone mapped out your murder in excruciating detail? That you were alive only because someone complained about a smell? The house at 1847 Millbrook Street was demolished 6 months later. The property remains empty to this day, a vacant lot overgrown with weeds. None of the neighbors walk past it if they can help it. Patricia Hendricks moved in with her daughter in Florida. She couldn't stand to live next to that empty space, knowing what had happened just 30 feet from where she'd slept every night. Sarah still has nightmares about the basement, about the photographs curling at the edges in the humidity, about the chair sitting in the center of that circle of plastic bins, about the journal entries written in neat, careful handwriting that revealed absolutely nothing about the man behind them. She's investigated dozens of cases since then. But when people ask about the worst crime she's ever worked, she always goes quiet for a moment before changing the subject. Because how do you explain that kind of evil to someone who's never seen it? The thing that haunts her most isn't the violence or the death, it's the randomness. Rebecca Torres parked in the wrong section of a parking lot on the wrong Thursday night. Megan Carlisle stopped to help a stranger whose car had broken down. Jennifer Hollis walked her dog at the same time every evening. Simple choices, ordinary moments, the mundane details of everyday life that, through no fault of their own, put them in the path of a predator. Daniel Marsh could have been anyone, your neighbor, your coworker, the quiet man who holds the door for you at the coffee shop. He left no trail, no pattern, nothing that would have identified him until it was far too late. That's what keeps Sarah awake at night, not the monster they caught, but the ones they haven't, the quiet ones, the forgettable ones. The ones who are watching right now, taking photographs, making plans, writing in journals about the victims they've chosen. Because in every neighborhood, behind every ordinary door, there might be a basement, and in that basement, secrets that run deeper than anyone wants to imagine. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit studied the Marsh case extensively, trying to understand what created such a predator. They found no childhood trauma, no head injuries, no clear catalyst. Sometimes, they concluded, evil doesn't need a reason. It simply exists. 7 families received small comfort from knowing what happened to their daughters, their sisters, their friends. But that knowledge came with new horrors. The details of how they'd died, the suffering they'd endured, the reality that they'd been so close to rescue if only someone had noticed sooner. Jennifer Hollis, Sarah learned through a mutual contact, started a foundation in honor of the 7 victims. It provides resources for missing persons cases, particularly those that cross jurisdictional boundaries. She turned her survival into purpose, her trauma into advocacy. As for Sarah Chen, she left the detective division 2 years later. The basement on Millbrook Street wasn't the only reason, but it was the final weight on a scale that had been tipping for years. She teaches criminal justice now at a local university, training the next generation of investigators. She tells them about Daniel Marsh, about the importance of listening to neighbors who report strange smells, about how the most dangerous predators are often the ones you'd never suspect. And sometimes, late at night when she can't sleep, she thinks about all the basements she's never seen, all the quiet houses with dark secrets, all the ordinary-looking men who might be taking photographs right now, learning routines, making plans. She thinks about the victims who got away, the Jennifer Hollises of the world, and the ones who didn't. The ones whose names we'll never know because no one reported a smell, or the smell was dismissed, or the complaint was filed in the wrong jurisdiction at the wrong time. The monsters are real. They live among us, invisible and patient. And the only thing standing between them and their victims is vigilance, luck, and sometimes just the simple act of a neighbor who refused to ignore what their instincts were telling them. Patricia Hendricks saved Jennifer Hollis's life by making a phone call about a bad smell, such a small thing, such an ordinary act of civic duty. And yet it made all the difference between 7 victims and 8. Remember that the next time something doesn't feel right, the next time you notice something strange about the quiet neighbor who keeps odd hours, the next time your instincts tell you that something is wrong, even if you can't quite articulate what it is, trust that feeling, make that call. Because somewhere, in a basement you'll never see, someone might be waiting for a rescue they don't even know they need. The case of 1847 Millbrook Street is closed now, But its lessons remain open, a reminder that vigilance is not paranoia, and that the price of silence can be measured in lives. 7 women didn't make it out of that basement. Jennifer Hollis did. And the only difference between them was timing, chance, and one retired schoolteacher who decided that a strange smell was worth reporting. In the end, that's all we can do: pay attention, speak up, and hope that when evil comes to our neighborhoods wearing an ordinary face, someone will notice before it's too late.